Hi and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1247B, and today's date is April 5th, 2017, and the title of the episode is The Deep State Distraction Tactic is Pushing Trump to Face Putin. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, the White House came out with some news today that Steve Bannon, he was removed from Trump's National Security Council. Now, this is one of the biggest shakeup at the White House since Mike Flynn resigned in February. And what we're seeing is that Trump has reorganized his National Security Council, removing his chief strategist, Steve Bannon, as well as downgrading the role of his Homeland Security Advisor, Tom Bossert, while elevating National Intelligence Director Dan Coats and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Marine Corps General Joseph Dunford, who will again be the regular attendees of the NSC's Principals Committee. And we can see right now that Trump is continually shaking things up, moving things around, and we're starting to see that things are really starting to heat up with regards to the spying, with regards to the Russian collusion with Trump, which there is no evidence whatsoever. There is absolutely nothing there. It is losing steam completely. But the problem is that the deep state, they are worried and nervous because we can see what's happening and what's going on with this whole spying thing on the Trump administration. We see that Chris Matthews from MSNBC and Mother Jones DC Bureau Chief Dave Korn, well, they were engaged in a lively round of mental gymnastics over the Susan Rice unmasking controversy, and they claimed it's nothing more than a racist, sexist ploy by the president to distract attention from the real investigation, which is the Russian collusion. So, if you notice, they always revert back to racists and sexists when they're caught, when they can't explain or they don't want to do any investigation on what is really going on. And they always have to name call. This is what they resort to. Now, if they were true journalists and they were truly going out and looking at all the evidence, they would say, you know something, maybe we should investigate this a little bit further. Something is here. But we can see the corporate media, they are controlled by the deep state. CNN's Don Lemon, like we said yesterday, well, he doesn't even want to follow it. He's just calling it fake news. We're not covering. We're not even going to talk about it. Now, we need to understand something very important about this whole thing, that there would have been no intelligence need for Susan Rice to ask for identities to be unmasked. If there had been a real need to reveal the identities, an intelligence need based on American interests, the unmasking would have been done by the investigating agencies, not Susan Rice. The National Security Advisor is not an investigator. She's a White House staffer. The president's staff is a consumer of intelligence, not a generator or collector of it. If Susan Rice was unmasking Americans, it was not to fulfill an intelligence need based on American interest. It was to fulfill a political desire based on Democratic Party interests. And this is exactly what has been happening here, is Susan Rice, with others, they were unmasking it to find out if they can get Trump. This was the whole point of it. And what's happening right now is they're very nervous. Now, Trump was out there, and he told a group of reporters at the White House earlier today that he's convinced that the former National Security Advisor to President Obama may have committed a crime by seeking the identities of his associates who were incidentally surveilled. And we can see right now that there's going to be an investigation. Susan Rice is going to have to testify, and the deep state, the Obama administration, they're getting very nervous about all this. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. In addition to Michael Flynn, at least one more member of the Trump transition team was unmasked in intelligence reports due to multiple foreign conversations that were related to Russia. Now, Rice wasn't the administration official who instigated Mr. Flynn's unmasking. There was one other high-level official giving unmasking orders. How do we know this? Well, GOP lawmakers on the House Intelligence Committee said the names of the two U.S. citizens who were part of Mr. Trump's transition team have been unmasked in intelligence reports. One is Mr. Flynn, and the other hasn't been identified. Rice had requested the unmasking of at least one. And we know that she wasn't calling the shots because there was another person who was higher up than her who was calling the shots. In other words, the story that Susan Rice is the unmasker is incomplete, as there is at least one more person exposing the identities of people in Trump's circle, and that the NSA and other intel agencies have been surveilling accidentally or otherwise. So what we're seeing right now is that there's other individuals involved in this. And this is where we're starting to see things start to fall apart. This is why we're seeing distractions. Because what does the deep state need to do? They need to get this story off of the news. They can't have it on the news. So they have to create distractions. What have they been doing? Well, we saw the sarin gas attack in Syria, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But they're going to be creating more and more distractions because they can't allow this to go any further. And remember what I said a couple reports ago. This is not going to disappear in a day or two. Remember 9/11. We know this was an inside job. We know the Bushes were involved. We know Israel was involved. We know the other entities were involved in all of this. This was a group effort to bring those towers down. What happened the day before? We understand that the Pentagon was missing, what, trillions of dollars? That story completely disappeared and was never brought up again. Why? Because we had this incredible event which completely covered it up. What do you think they're going to do now? Do you think it's just going to disappear? Because they can't make it disappear. Because this is going to implicate the Obama administration and probably the president himself. So if they let this go further, they can only call it fake news. They only can ignore it for a certain period of time. Because once the investigation starts and more documentation comes out, well, there's going to be a major problem. So they're going to have to push this a little bit harder. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Now, out in Germany, there is a renewed concern that more refugees are going to be entering Germany. Now, the people spoke up against Angela Merkel saying, listen, we do not want any more refugees here. And there is a report that up to 270,000 Syrians in Germany have the right to bring their family members into the country. Now, this is going to be a big, big problem because we know what the German people have done before. They said, listen, we're sick and tired of this. Not just Germany. A lot of the European countries are saying, listen, we don't want all these refugees in our country. This is why these countries started to put up borders and fences to say, you know what? Forget the Schengen. We don't want these individuals in this country. And we can see right now that Angela Merkel is going to have a problem if this does happen. Out in North Korea, we can see that North Korea, they might have fired another ballistic missile. And we can see right now that the United States government central bankers, they are pushing a war right now. They want to get into a war so bad because what is happening? The economy is failing. The truth is coming out. The deep state is in trouble. And we can see right now that Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, well, he issued the following fascinatingly brief statement. North Korea launched yet another intermediate-range ballistic missile. The United States has spoken enough about North Korea. We have no further comment. So what does this all mean? Well, we can see the deep state, they're continually running these type of news stories. They want the Trump administration to react. They want to get into war. Now, I don't know who's feeding Trump and his administration this intelligence information, but we could see that it's done on purpose to lead him in a certain direction, because when he came into this campaign, unless he's just completely twisted around on a dime here and he's saying let's go to war, because he was kind of against war and he was making promises to the people that, you know, he wanted to make deals with Russia, he wanted to stop the wars out in the Middle East, and we're starting to see that the opposite is actually happening. Actually, right now it seems a lot worse than it was during Obama's time, because we could see the deep state, and if you notice, they're getting very nervous, They're pushing more events, and we're seeing more ground troops in Yemen. And we are starting to see that things are really starting to heat up. Now, Putin was giving a speech, and he said something very, very interesting. And he just came out and said it. 95% of the world's terrorist attacks are orchestrated by the CIA. And the St. Petersburg metro bombing must be investigated with this in mind. You think he knows something? Well, he knows that the CIA has been doing this. He knows the deep state is behind this. And he's looking at the situation in this country saying, and he probably has evidence already, that this was done by the intelligence agencies. Because we know they want him to bow down to their demands. And if they don't, they will go after him. And what we're seeing right now is the deep state, they are now pushing their events. Now, a couple reports ago, I said the deep state, they're going to have to create events that are out of this world. They're going to have to be huge to distract everyone. And what are those events? That would be war. That would be an economic collapse. The combination of both. And to get there, well, they need some type of an event. Well, they're starting out with the Syrian gas attack. Now, this is a repeat of 2013, a repeat from 2013 all the way up to this time period. They couldn't say it was sarin gas. They had to say it was chlorine gas because the U.S. and the UN and the coalition forces helped Assad remove all his sarin gas. So how can they say sarin gas? But this time around, they have to use sarin gas because that sounds a lot worse than chlorine. So that's what they're using right now. But we can see right now, their objective right now is to set up the no-fly zones, the stabilization zones, those safe zones that they like to call them. And they're pushing the idea, and they're continually out there trying to say, this is what we're going to need. Remember, they created bases in Syria. They modernized them. They extended the runways, they hardened the runways to allow C-17s to come in. They're bringing in military assets right now for a purpose. Troops are being deployed in this area. Why do you think they don't want to tell you how many troops are going to this area? It's not to surprise the Islamic State. Russia and Assad and his forces, they have this under control. They don't need the United States there. The United States is an invasion force inside of Syria. But we can see that everyone's jumping on board this. We see Erdogan is out there, and he's saying that the Syrian president, he's a murderer after this chemical attack because he wants Assad removed. Turkey was not in Syria fighting the Islamic State and helping out. They were carving out the safe zone. They were carving out this area. And we see right now that the corporate media, the deep state, they are pushing this as hard as they possibly can. They brought out a 7-year-old girl, and she spoke to the audience, and she told people, we must stop the war. Why can't we stop the war? Well, talk to the United States government central bankers. Talk to the deep state. They're the ones who created the war. They're the ones who've been funding the Islamic State. They've been the ones who've been funding Al-Qaeda. They've been the ones they've been funding Al-Sham. They're the ones who've been funding all of these terrorist groups. Look at the rest of the countries. Who started the war in all the other countries? Oh, right. It was the United States government central bankers. Somalia, Yemen. Did they attack the United States? No. Libya, Lebanon. Did they attack the United States? No. Syria. Did they attack the United States? No. None of these countries attacked the United States. But we have troops in each and every one of these countries. We've started wars in each and every one of these countries. So if this little girl, who most likely is an actor, or they found someone to make this plea, because normally what they do is they find a high-ranking official, they use their children to make the plea, just like in Kuwait with the babies in the incubators, and the nurse who came out and testified in front of Congress, well, who was she really? She was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador in Washington. That's who it was. It was a complete setup. It was a lie to get us into war in Iraq. So we can see right now they're doing the same exact thing. They're using the same exact propaganda. And like I said, there are patterns to the deep state. And we can see right now that Trump, He is on a collision course with Putin. This is what the deep state is setting up right now. They want Trump to face off with Putin because we can see right now Trump was on the White House lawn making an announcement saying that Assad has crossed the line at this point. And we're starting to see that things are going to go rapidly downhill. Now, we have to understand that the deep state is basically creating this entire event as a distraction to what's happening with Susan Rice, so people forget about that and they start worrying about this. Is this going to be enough over time? Because do you really think the Susan Rice and the investigation into the Obama administration is just going to go away? Well, it's not. And this is only going to last for a couple of days. So we need to understand that they're going to push this a little bit harder. Now, we're already seeing that Nikki Haley is warning the U.S. could act alone if Russia vetoes the UN security resolution. And Russia is already out there saying that they're going to be standing by Assad in Syria. He had nothing to do with this. And the text that is presented in this UN Security Council resolution, well, it already shows that Assad is guilty of the crime without any investigation. Well, this is the way the deep state works. They use propaganda. They don't show facts. And remember, pictures of individuals who are gassed, that is not a fact. That is the aftermath of what has happened. You need to show a link of how these people were gassed. And I'll say it again. I've said it many times before. If you are in a courtroom and you hold up a picture of a dead person and you say that person killed this person in the picture, that's not evidence. You need to show a link of how did they know this person? How did they kill it? Where's the weapon? When did they meet? What was the motive? You need to do all of this in between to show that this person actually did it. And all they do is show the pictures and say Assad did this. That's not good enough anymore. They need to show facts. They need to show evidence, but they can't. Now, the Russian Defense Ministry is saying that Syria was bombing around Idlib in the town of Khan Sheikhoun, or Sheikhoun. And they're saying that they hit a warehouse. Now, that might have been full of chemical weapons, and that belonged to guess who? You got it. The terrorist groups. So if that was the warehouse and that was holding the chemical weapons, that might have caused what we saw. Now, we looked at the pictures before. We saw individuals in gas masks. We saw individuals with no gloves, and they were touching all the people. It was in an area where they already had a water tank truck and they were spraying the people down. But it doesn't make sense because they wouldn't touch these individuals if it was sarin gas. Now, maybe it was chlorine gas, or maybe it was a complete hoax. Does it really matter at this point? Not really, because what we can see right now is they're going to be playing this completely up and pushing their agenda. And right now, we can see the deep state. They're not just going to stop with this gas attack, because like I said before, they're going to have to do one better. Because the Susan Rice and all the other truths that are coming out, they're not going to stop. Think about 9/11 once again. After this horrific tragedy, this event, when the towers came down, that whole entire investigation into the trillions and trillions of dollars completely disappeared, which was announced the day before. They're going to have an event that is so mind-boggling, that is so horrific, that people will completely forget what happened with Susan Rice and the Obama administration, and who knows, it could implicate many other people. So they are on course right now, not just to have an economic collapse. I don't think that's going to be enough right now. I think they're going to need something even bigger, and we've talked about this before, with blaming a cyber attack maybe on North Korea, blaming maybe a physical attack of some type of missile. Even though North Korea doesn't have the technology to do this, they'll say that they do. Maybe they'll try something out because they've been building this story up. Maybe they'll try Al-Qaeda or the Islamic State, because the Islamic State group, which is really beaten in Syria right now by Russia and Syria, they put out a kill list with names and addresses of over 8,000 Americans, including Trump. Well, don't they know where he lives? He lives in the White House. So that's kind of ridiculous. But they have 8,000 Americans, and they're ready to be hit by lone wolf gunmen. Now, they could make the case where they have multiple false flags in many cities, and they try to assassinate Trump. Remember, we're going back to the assassination of Trump, because they already put this message out there that they're going to try to assassinate 8,000 Americans and Trump. So it looks like this next event could be a physical attack around the country to make everyone forget, or they might try to assassinate Trump, and they could blame this on the Islamic State. But whatever is going to happen, it's going to usher in a war. It's going to usher in the economic collapse, and you need to be prepared. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially, please be prepared.